What if I told you that a single experiment, hidden in the depths of scientific history, quietly shifted our understanding of reality itself? That the boundaries we thought existed between mind and matter, perception and truth, are far more fluid than we ever imagined. Imagine for a moment that the human brain, this intricate network of neurons, is less a fixed organ and more a dynamic system, constantly rewiring itself in response to experience, thought, and even expectation. Picture your mind as an energy network, a series of signals bouncing across a web of electrical connections, sensitive not only to the world outside, but also to the world you construct within. In the mid-20th century, a series of clandestine experiments sought to probe this very interface, the threshold between observation and reality, between perception and the underlying rules of the universe. These were not ordinary psychological studies. They were carefully designed to test the limits of the brain's adaptability, the elasticity of perception, and the strange, almost quantum-like behaviors that emerge when consciousness interacts with what we call reality. The implications of these experiments were profound, not just for neuroscience and psychology, but for philosophy, physics, and the way we understand our place in the cosmos. They revealed that reality, as we experience it, is not a fixed entity, but a malleable construct shaped by expectation, attention, and the brain's remarkable capacity for adaptation. The first hint came from studies on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself after injury, trauma, or unusual sensory input. In the 1960s, neuroscientists began observing that patients who had lost limbs or experienced sensory deprivation often developed new neural pathways that seemed to compensate for what was missing. These findings were initially dismissed as anomalies, but over time, they pointed to a more profound truth. The brain is not a passive receiver of information. It is an active constructor of experience. In parallel, psychologists exploring perception began to notice strange phenomena. The brain, it seemed, does not simply report the external world, it interprets it. Optical illusions, auditory distortions, and the placebo effect all hinted at a deeper principle. The mind can shape reality in subtle but measurable ways. It was within this context that a secret experiment, combining insights from neuroscience, psychology, and even early quantum theory, was conceived. Researchers were curious about the limits of human perception under extreme conditions. Could the brain be trained to detect signals that, according to conventional physics, should be imperceptible? Could consciousness itself influence the behavior of the world, not metaphorically, but measurably? Volunteers were subjected to carefully controlled sensory manipulations. Some were exposed to ambiguous stimuli in near-complete darkness. Others were asked to focus on tasks that required them to detect subtle patterns in random noise. Electrodes recorded neural activity with unprecedented precision. Early results were surprising. Participants did not merely perceive what was presented. They anticipated patterns that were not physically present. Their brains were filling in gaps, predicting outcomes based on internal models, rather than external signals. In a way, the experiment revealed a profound truth about the human mind. The limits we perceive are often illusions, boundaries created by expectation rather than by reality itself. To understand this, consider the brain as a sophisticated signal processing system. Each neuron is a node, each synapse a connection carrying information. But unlike a simple computer, the brain is adaptive. It rewires itself, strengthens certain pathways, and suppresses others, all in response to experience. When faced with uncertainty, the brain does not passively wait. It generates hypotheses, simulates outcomes, and selects the most probable reality according to its internal model. This is why, in the experiment, participants often saw patterns that were never present. Their brains were not hallucinating. They were predicting, testing, and constructing reality on the fly. Stress played a critical role in this process. Far from being merely a negative force, acute stress triggers a cascade of neurochemical responses that heighten perception, sharpen focus, and prime the brain for rapid adaptation. In the experiment, controlled stresses, minor but carefully timed, enhanced participants' sensitivity to subtle cues. Here the paradox emerges. What we instinctively fear as a weakening or compromising state is actually the brain activating its protective and adaptive mechanisms. The very moment we feel vulnerable, our neural network is working overtime to safeguard us, to detect patterns, anticipate threats, and reorganize itself for optimal functioning. This principle has echoes in both biology and quantum theory. Just as particles in quantum experiments behave differently when observed, the human brain seems to alter the reality it perceives based on attention and expectation. While we are not collapsing wave functions in a literal sense, we are actively participating in shaping the world we experience. Your perception, your focus, your beliefs, they are not passive filters. They are dynamic forces interacting with the signals around you. The experiment also revealed something even more intriguing. Individual variability in perception was enormous. Some participants seemed to anticipate complex patterns effortlessly, while others struggled. Neuroscientists traced this difference to the structure and connectivity of the participants' neural networks. But they also noticed a psychological component. Those who approached the task with curiosity and openness outperformed those who relied on rigid expectations or fear. Here we encounter a profound insight into the nature of learning and adaptation. The mind is not merely shaped by external stimuli, but by the attitude with which we engage reality. Our expectations, our willingness to explore uncertainty, and our capacity to embrace ambiguity fundamentally alter the architecture of our experience. This finding has implications that extend far beyond the laboratory. In everyday life, we often underestimate the brain's capacity to adapt. We cling to routines, habits, and familiar interpretations of reality, assuming that our perception is a fixed mirror of the external world. Yet the experiment shows that by challenging assumptions, by deliberately exposing ourselves to novel experiences and uncertainty, we can expand the bandwidth of our perception, heighten awareness, and even reshape the neural circuitry that defines who we are. The philosophical ramifications are equally profound. If reality is partly constructed by the mind, then consciousness is not a passive observer but an active participant in the unfolding of experience. This idea resonates with ancient philosophical traditions, yet here it is framed in rigorous scientific terms. The brain, it seems, is both a sensor and a shaper of reality, a bridge between the measurable external world and the subjective landscape of experience. Midway through the experiment, researchers introduced a subtle twist. Participants were presented with stimuli designed to trigger doubt and uncertainty. A simple signal might appear ambiguous, or patterns might intentionally conflict with expectations. Conventional wisdom would predict confusion, stress, and decreased performance. Instead, something remarkable occurred. Participants' brains adapted rapidly. Neural pathways activated in ways that stabilized perception, resolved ambiguity, and even enhanced detection of subtle cues. In other words, the moments in which participants thought they were weakest were precisely the moments in which their brains were most resilient. The twist is elegant. Perceived vulnerability is often the trigger for extraordinary adaptability. When we feel our limits are tested, our neural network responds by reorganizing itself, reinforcing pathways, and optimizing performance in ways that are invisible to conscious awareness. This insight has broader implications for psychology, education, and even personal development. It suggests that failure, challenge, and uncertainty are not merely obstacles but signals for growth. The brain interprets difficulty as an opportunity to rewire, adapt, and evolve. We see this principle mirrored in natural systems. Ecosystems flourish under stresses that encourage diversity. Immune systems strengthen through exposure to pathogens, and neurons form new connections when challenged by novel stimuli. Returning to the quantum metaphor, consider how a particle's state is not determined until it is observed. Similarly, our perception, our understanding of reality, is not fixed. It is shaped by attention, expectation, and active engagement. The experiment revealed that by consciously directing focus, individuals could influence outcomes in subtle but measurable ways. The brain, in effect, participates in the creation of the reality it perceives. This does not imply magical thinking. Rather, it demonstrates a fundamental principle of adaptive systems. Observation and interaction are inseparable from the behavior of complex networks. As the experiment concluded, one of the most profound revelations emerged from the convergence of neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy. Reality as we experience it is simultaneously external and constructed. Our neural networks are constantly predicting, correcting, and shaping experience. Stress and uncertainty, often feared as threats, are catalysts for heightened perception and adaptability. Perception itself is not a passive reflection, but an active process, and consciousness participates in defining what is real. The implications extend to daily life. Every thought, every moment of attention, every engagement with uncertainty shapes the architecture of your mind. Habits, beliefs, and expectations sculpt neural pathways, reinforcing some signals and suppressing others. The energy network of the brain is continuously rewired by experience, highlighting a dynamic interplay between biology, psychology, and the philosophical dimensions of consciousness. Imagine your mind as a vast city of interconnected pathways, where each street represents a neural connection and each intersection a point of decision. When you encounter novelty, uncertainty, or challenge, the city reorganizes itself, roads expand, shortcuts form, and traffic flows more efficiently. Your brain is not static. It is a living system, constantly adapting to optimize perception, performance, and survival. This understanding reframes the way we approach learning, creativity, and personal growth. By deliberately exposing ourselves to complexity, ambiguity, and challenge, we engage the brain's natural adaptive mechanisms. By cultivating curiosity and openness, we enhance the predictive power of neural networks, increasing sensitivity to subtle cues and deepening the richness of experience. And yet, perhaps the most humbling aspect of this experiment is how little we truly know about the limits of perception and consciousness. Even in controlled laboratory settings, with advanced neuroimaging and precise measurements, the brain exhibits behaviors that defy easy explanation. It anticipates, it compensates, it constructs reality in ways that challenge our intuitions. If a single experiment can reveal such depth, what does that imply about the reality we navigate daily, unobserved, untested, and largely taken for granted? The philosophical takeaway is equally compelling. Consciousness is not a passive passenger, but an active co-author of experience. The boundaries of perception are not dictated solely by external reality, but by the interplay between the brain's adaptive architecture and the attention we bring to the world. Every observation, every act of focus, every willingness to confront uncertainty is a form of participation in the unfolding of reality. As we reflect on these findings, a paradox emerges that mirrors the very twist discovered in the experiment. The moments in which we feel most constrained, most limited, are often the moments in which our adaptive potential is greatest. The brain, this intricate energy network, responds to challenge and uncertainty not with fragility, but with resilience, creativity, and the capacity for profound transformation. In practical terms, this insight invites a new approach to life and learning. Embrace uncertainty not as a threat, but as a signal for neural growth. Approach failure and challenge not as endpoints, but as catalysts for adaptation. Recognize that your mind is both observer and participant, shaping the world as much as it perceives it. This realization bridges science and philosophy, biology and consciousness, psychology and quantum metaphor. It suggests a model of reality that is at once rigorous, measurable, and profoundly participatory. In conclusion, the secret experiment that began decades ago reminds us that reality is not a static backdrop against which life unfolds. It is a dynamic, emergent construct, shaped by the interplay of neural networks, perception, and conscious attention. Our brains are adaptive, resilient, and astonishingly capable of constructing reality in ways that exceed our conscious understanding. Perceived weakness often signals hidden strength. Challenge and uncertainty are not merely obstacles. They are invitations for growth. And consciousness, far from being a passive witness, is an active participant in the ongoing creation of experience. As you leave this exploration, I invite you to reflect: how might your own perceptions, expectations, and attention be shaping the reality you navigate every day? What patterns are you anticipating unconsciously? And how might embracing curiosity, uncertainty, and challenge expand the richness of your experience? The experiment offers no simple answers, only profound questions, and in those questions lies the opportunity for insight, adaptation, and transformation. If you found this journey into the hidden mechanisms of the mind and the fluid nature of reality as mind-expanding as I hope you did, Take a moment to engage. Comment below with your thoughts. Share experiences where perception shaped your reality, and explore these questions in your own life. Like this video if it sparked curiosity, and subscribe to MindSpark Science to continue exploring the intersections of neuroscience, psychology, quantum thought, and the philosophy of mind. Together, we can illuminate the hidden networks of thought, perception, and consciousness, discovering just how extraordinary the mind and reality truly is.